settle down, maybe 3 more minutes, and then I know others are going to show up, but they're showing up a little bit later, so we're going to get started. I'd like to thank you all for being here this afternoon and taking time out. I am pretty confident that you will find the content of what we have to present today and the information and knowledge that we're sharing with you today very useful. Things have changed and things are changing, and we live in a changing world, changing a lot faster than we expected. Some of us have worked around the world and realized the need to share some of the knowledge with the community here in the Cayman Islands. Having worked with Josh in the past in Canada, I value a lot of his expertise. He's got a huge responsibility over a community, 30,000 students across 4 different campuses with residents, probably over 100 nationalities or so. And, so they have a lot of issues that they've dealt with as a university and a college, which I'm sure you'll find interesting. And it's applicable for a high school or a school or even for the prison or community, any community actually. It's basically a community-related issues that we are preparing ourselves for. So why are we doing it as a security center? Why are we doing these kind of sessions? We started initially by bringing experts for different sectors. We started with property management and construction. Again, to enlighten the community, to share best practices. Those best practices could save you time, money, potential lawsuits, and most importantly, loss of life. Education, we're dealing with young students who represent the future and actually the most valuable commodity for their parents and for all of us. And I think it is definitely worth the time to learn about ways to make them safer so they can get the best possible education and you as organizations are successful in delivering your missions. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Josh, who will spend a few minutes introducing himself and taking you through his presentation.
All right. Thanks, Abe. Going to start the timer because the marketing folks are very strict and will slap me. First things first, thanks for having me on the island. I was on 7 Mile this morning picking out seashells for my daughters, and it was just the most peaceful thing that I've had all year. I went to Italy this summer, I went to BC a few weeks ago, and this was just a beautiful place, so thanks for having me. Like Abe said, my name is Josh. Let's see. Turning my clicker back on here. There we go. My name is Josh. I'm the security director at Sheridan College in Oakville, Ontario. Sheridan College is one of Canada's largest arts institutions. And with the arts comes a lot of inherent issues that we see on a routine basis, 30,000 students, a lot of mental health right now. Also a lot of international students that come to campus. And really got me here, Abe loosely alluded to that we've crossed paths previously, but all the experiences that we've had together, some of the organizations will be familiar. So, working through certifications for security best practices with groups like ACES, IHOS, which is the healthcare side of things, Ontario Fire Marshals, threat assessment conferences, threat assessment certifications, security organizations that we've worked with in the past. I'm going to add the Security Center in here. And then eventually Sheridan College, who I work with now. And so having been able to work as a security guard, as a security manager, on the healthcare side, on the education side, I've had kind of a full circle of understanding where everybody's coming from and being able to support those conversations with those partners to make sure that we're all kind of talking the same language and understanding each other. So, I might have to be closer to the clicker. A few topics that I want to go over today, and what's probably going to happen today is it's going to be a bit of a rapid fire of a lot of topics. I would love more time. I could talk about any one of these topics for a full 2 hours, 8 hours, 4 hours, whatever it might be. What I'm hoping to do is plant a little bit of a seed, right? So whether you're coming from education, from victim services, from policing, from the jails, or from your own security services, I want to plant some seeds so that at the end of today's event, you could take some notes, go back to the security center and say, hey, this is the part that we really liked. Let's kind of talk a little bit more about those things that impact us. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about some of the topics we haven't covered and where we'll go from here. To get closer. I want to start off with a bit of a disclaimer, and this is actually something that I've heard a little bit of from everyone I've talked to for the last few days on the island. People have been acting very oddly in the last few years, and this is a little bit of post-COVID behavior. Social expectations and norms have changed. People have gotten more rude and more violent, and I'm hearing a little bit about the news on the island in the last little bit. Just to reassure you, this is not unique to the island. This is happening all across North America, all across the world. The amount of stress that social media has put on everybody as we were monitoring COVID, as we were given different expectations. I know some of us were on John Hopkins' website every day seeing what the updated stats were. It really created a sense of stress and fear in people. And so our behaviors and social skills have really changed as a result of that. It's going to take us a long time to bounce back from that and get back to where we need to go. And that's kind of why we're here today. So for what you're experiencing and some of the challenges, rest assured, it's a lot of us right now. Another concept before we get into the topics that I want to review is crime control theater. And so you'll understand where you can apply this to your settings that you're in. And so going back to the previous slide of post-COVID behaviors and what we've been experiencing lately, crime control theater is basically the concept of when something happens, people want an immediate solution without looking at the root cause of what got us to that point. And putting in that immediate solution, connecting with your security provider or with anyone else to do something that's not actually addressing the root cause is actually making things a little bit worse. So this is the whole concept of us talking together, debriefing, getting together. We're going to look at a few case studies throughout the presentation of cases that got to a point that it shouldn't have gotten to. And we're talking about cases that have led to, unfortunately, some deaths, some lawsuits, some assaults. But ultimately, the problem is we're not investigating the root cause of issues, and we're making situations worse as a result of that. And again, it's natural for when your space is invaded, when your work is invaded, to feel vulnerable. This is upsetting, but to collect yourself and get back to the root cause and working as a team to getting to that point. So a couple of cases that are unique to myself and the setting that I work in, but might be relatable to the settings that you're in. And so I'm going to give you a couple of cases that happened to us lately at the colleges. Student comes banging on the president's office, demands answers. They haven't gotten those answers for months of dealing with another department. A student uses an edged weapon in the residence. They inflict bodily harm on another individual because that person's been rejecting their advances for months and everybody's been knowing about it. A student calls Kids Help Phone and says, I don't know if Kids Help Phone is kind of a global thing, but support for children. What would happen if a bomb went off at a school? Because for months, this particular faculty member has been really upsetting the student because they've been bumping their classes and not mistreating them. And I ask here, what seems to be the root cause of all these issues? That's kind of the exact concept I gave you a second ago. What's the root cause? And you know what? I kind of gave you a hint because I highlighted months. What ended up happening in these cases is that somebody within our institutions with the responsibility to support those individuals was aware of the situation, but didn't share that information. So the first concept that I'm going to bring forward here is case management. And so quite often when I'm looking at occurrences that happen within our institutions, I have this concept and theory that I use. And it's going to show up here somewhere, but how are things going to look at the inquest? I actually have an inquest here. I'll get to it in a second, but how are things going to look at the inquest? And who did not do their due diligence to share information, to flag concerning behaviors, to connect with other departments? And so what case management essentially is an integrated solution for conduct files, Title IX, which is sexual violence. It's the term they use in the US. and behavioral intervention for individuals. A lot of us might be doing somewhat of an extended case management team. You might be meeting with your ad hoc groups, the people that work in our departments. We might have care teams, which are typically for wellness, counselors, guidance, residences, on-site nurses, et cetera, et cetera. But are we really getting to all the areas of our institutions to make sure that those individuals are being supported? And that's kind of my comment about what's happening on the back end with sharing of information and how things will look at the inquest if we're not doing so accurately. And so what some institutions seem to be doing is having something like this, a flow chart of, based off of this type of incident, those are our recipients. And then we have a security guard emailing out a list. A lot of concerns here. What happens when the list needs to be updated and does it get distributed? What if there's human error? What if there's out of offices? And this used to be ours at the college. This used to be our distribution list. And it was accurate 93% of the time because of all these concerns. And then privacy concerns, right? Because you're dealing with some sensitive subjects. And if the wrong people are getting that information, that's actually the opposite, but still a concern to do with case management. So you want to make sure that you have a solution. Doing something like this, though, is a really good start. But eventually, if you look into solutions that might provide a centralized database for you to share that information, to automate it, to keep it private, to hold it on a cloud, here's some solutions for you. So a program that we use is, the vendor doesn't matter, but it is Simplicity Advocate. There's a lot of services out there. It organizes everything. It tells you what still needs to be triaged, how many are pending in progress, the different departments within your institution. And if you're the owner for your institution, I'm the director of security, I'm a super user for the entire program. I could log in. And when a case comes to me, because I also sit as the chair of the threat assessment team at the institution, if a case comes forward with student X, I get to write in student X into the system and look at every single report so I could really figure out what the baseline behavior is of that individual is, what the context surrounding that individual is, and how to make sure we support that individual within our systems. And here's another concept I want to let you know about within our institutions. When something happens with an individual and their behavior is of concern, we actually don't look to punish the individual. We look for ways to support the individual. Because we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we weren't supporting the people that we're serving, right? So if we can have an encounter with an individual and offer solutions and they end up being successful in the end, that's a win for everybody. So this is kind of what a platform for the system looks like for us. Now, with case management, you begin to run your data and figure out what the trends are within your institutions. You could break it down by department, by incident type, and this data is actually going to relay a little bit more back towards building cases for your security departments down the road. Where's the demand? When is the demand? And as you see here, might be a little further away, but we have the departments within our institution: student rights, occupational health, human resources, security, and some of the numbers, right? So we actually only launched case management a few years ago because of all those concerns we were having, because of those cases that were on the list earlier, which do lead to things like lawsuits, and we don't want to be involved with that, but that's also negligence and goes to show that we're not serving our individuals accurately. So, we launch it. The average case sits for a long period of time because we're learning the program. We get more reports, and right now we're trending towards 10 times the amount of reports that we had in year one. Some of the highlights I made that kind of helps you understand how your institutions work, especially, again, regardless of the type of institution you're in, helps you understand how other users use the program too. So for example, I highlighted a bunch of zeros across the board. What's going on with my HR team? How come they're not using the program? If you want the real, transparent answer, sometimes technology is a little more integrated than more mature individuals are able to use, right? So sometimes when you get systems, whether it be case management, scheduling systems, you want to make sure that your staff are trained in how to use them. And then again, across the board, I highlighted September. September stats are double to triple any other month. Obvious for schools. What's September? First semester of the year, right? So we were talking at St. Ignatius 2 days ago, yesterday? Sorry. And we were talking, right? And we were talking about a little bit of SEPTED and incident management planning. And depending on the time of the year, that actually might mean that that's when you might need to do your campaigns, invest a little bit more money, do signage, do the handouts to set a tone in September to help prepare you for the rest of the year and bring the rest of the stats down. So case management was one of those topics that we wanted to review and give you a brief overview on. Again, along with all the rest of the topics that we go through, if you have any more Q&A, we're doing 10 minutes of Q&A at the end of these two sessions. So it'll be 50 minutes, 10 minutes Q&A break. I'll be here, come and ask, or send it Abe and Maria's way too, right? Security infrastructure is the next topic I wanted to kind of quickly review. And when we mention security infrastructure, what typically comes to mind right away? Cameras. Fences? Actually, fences is a good one. I didn't write that down on the list. There's go-to stuff, right? So I put a few in green right off the bat. Cameras, card access, emergency phones. That's all security infrastructure. What a lot of people don't realize, and one of the questions I got a few days ago was, how much is it going to cost me to build my security department? And I said, that really depends on a lot of things with your institutions. How are you laid out? What infrastructure do you have to support you? What's the right solution for guards versus technology? So I can't give you a round number. What I could tell you at an institution of 30,000 individuals, my budget for guarding services alone works out to $100 per head per student, $3 million. That's not going to be the right calculation for some institutions that might have 500 or 1,000 students, $100 per head. So you really can't do that. But individual assessments for your institutions through the Security Center really gives you a better idea of what that should be, along with the numbers of your case management, and soon to show you, along with the numbers of your incident reports on site. What people seem to forget sometimes is the other half of security infrastructure. And I'm happy you mentioned fences because I didn't write it down, but just because you buy a camera for $2,500 doesn't mean that installing the camera is going to be $2,500. And sorry, I might be using Canadian financial terms, but it's somewhat, some of it's relatable. Cabling, conduit, data closets, key boxes, keys themselves, mag locks, radios, duress buttons, software, clocks, security computers, phones, fire panels, computers. All of a sudden, your security infrastructure budget's gone through the roof. We had, and I'll get to it in a bit. Actually, I'll wait till then. I'll wait till there to explain it. But I'll give you an example where somebody got a $10 million budget at a snap of a finger, and I'll tell you why. So there's a lot to do with security infrastructure. Some key considerations I quickly want to review to do with infrastructure so that you have a bit of a better understanding. The device you're seeking out has to serve a purpose, right? So quite often at my institution, people say, oh, I want a camera here, I want an emergency phone there. I say, okay, well, why? What's going on? Are there incidents we're not aware of? Ultimately, yeah, you do need somebody to come in, do an assessment for you, give you an idea of why and what purpose it serves. Best practice for installation of devices is typically line of sight or one device per 100 yards. So if I'm down a hallway, especially if it's a main corridor of an institution, I want to be able to see that there's a device that serves a purpose. If it's a camera, if it's an emergency phone. And I'm talking a little bit more about larger institutions, if you're a jail, if you're a college. And you can get away a little bit with some smaller institutions, but you do want to make sure that you're meeting some basic needs there. You know the cost of the device, you could typically double that to figure out the cost of the installation. So $2,000 camera, $4,000 to have it installed, total cost all in. The installation of devices during renovations and construction is so much cheaper than the cost of installation after things have already been built. Because when things are already built, you're getting to the point of doing cabling, conduit, bringing subcontractors in. There's times that we bring X-ray machines in to read through cement walls to determine what cabling is behind the wall because we can't see, because that's the last thing we want to do, right? So footage, if you have cameras on site, best practice for footage is 2 weeks. Typically what happens, at least in the colleges, something takes place on campus somewhere. By the time somebody reports it to my student services department or HR, and then they do their investigation, and they come back to me and say, oh, hey, something happened 10 days ago. Do you still have it on footage? I'm like, yeah, 2 weeks is kind of tight. Our institution actually does 30 days of footage. And the Security Center can talk to you about footage retention and hard drives and cloud storage. But we actually have built in a lot of different analytics that serve our institution. And I think we might have talked about this a little bit at Ignatius the other day, but with Father, but it was after hours. There might not be recording because there's no activity, or you might have motion activated recording, which means that it brings down your server demand because there's less data. We actually cut the quality of our footage in half after 2 weeks because we know that we go to that footage less frequently. We don't need the reliability of the quality of footage. There's so much you can do. With analytics built into the camera systems now, you can have a camera in here that automatically notifies you if the room is over capacity because you've told the camera to count the number of heads, and they can do that now. And the camera's telling you it's over capacity. The camera can tell you that somebody was standing and all of a sudden they just fell. The camera can tell you that there's been a package that's been left here for a long period of time and that's suspicious. The camera can tell you that somebody's out in the parking lot right now going from car to car to car to car because that's been identified as suspicious behavior. And these companies have programmed their cameras to be able to tell you that type of stuff. So there's a lot of neat things that actually might offer you additional services outside of a physical security guard, but the technology is just through the roof now. And then servers can be over $100,000. We just upgraded a server on campus for $250,000. That we have 800 cameras on campus. Let's see how these systems kind of look on the back end now. We were looking at some cameras yesterday on a phone, but typically, I mean, the capabilities are there, the quality's there. You could split the screens up. Won't get into too much of it, but here's my monitoring center with my guards and the screens up on the wall. These walls are actually from Mitsubishi. This is what you see in the airports. I didn't design this because if I did design this, you know what I would have done? What's this, like a Sharp TV 70-inch? I would have done a bunch of these, and as soon as it died, I would have thrown it out and replaced it. Those things were $75,000 per tower. There's 2 towers, waste of money. But you know what? You go through, you learn, you see what works. And in your control centers, depending on your institutions, we have fire monitoring, elevator panels, fire monitoring computers. We have emails that come in, the phone lines for the institution. All sorts of functions that our call center and monitoring center does, so that when we have guards on the floor, they're actually serving the clients as opposed to having their head buried in the computer and on the phone. Security audits. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot and ask if you do audits on your equipment, but you should, and you should treat your equipment like you treat your records for your institution. Some of the best practice in Canada is we hold records for 5, 7, 9, and 11 years, depending on the type of information it is. Longer if it's personal health information, but less depending on the type of information. Again, here's the question I wrote here. How are things going to look at the inquest after the fact, right? After something's happened so significantly that somebody's coming back and saying, well, when did your system go out? Who was checking it? What did you do about it? I have a really good list of equipment here that should be part of your audits once a month. Once a month, have somebody part of your team doing these audits. I highlighted 2 of them at the end. Propped doors are horrible for us. A lot of our doors on our institution, that'd be bad at the jail too, right? Prop doors are really bad because the doors were not made to be held by a stopper on the ground. And what eventually starts happening is 2 things. One is a lot of our doors are on a system, an alarm system, an electronic access control system that as soon as it's propped or the movement isn't natural, it starts sending us beeps. And when that beep happens across the whole institution, and I get about 20,000 of them a day, the thing is when a real alarm comes in because somebody's pushed a panic button, what happens? Down the list and gone, right? So issue number 1. Issue number 2 is that when a door gets propped at the bottom and it has a closer on it, what starts to happen? The bottom stays there and then the top starts to, it angles. And then overnight, when nobody's in the building and somebody leaves and the door doesn't close all the way and then somebody gets in the building, well, how do you think they got in? Because you use the door not for the purpose it's used for. Keys. Has anybody ever had to rekey an entire facility? Yeah, I had to pay for one of those once. Luckily, it was a small facility, but you could imagine the cost, right? It was where they make calls, lozenges. I paid half the bill and the cleaning company paid half the bill. But you lose a key and you don't have a facility that has complete card access control, that's a huge issue. You have card access control, deactivate the card, change the parameters of the door, go into the computer system, do what you need to do. What's it cost you? I just asked your staff on the way out, $8 per card. Actually, that might have been your cost, not their cost, sorry. I disclosed your finances. So, just do your audits on your system. Emergency mass notification systems. So we have an app for our college. It's the Sheridan Alert app. And we were talking about this at the school yesterday. I said, what typically happens if there's an incident on campus and you need to notify everybody? Because I can appreciate the intimacy of the island and the intimacy of your own institutions, but you still want to have a system to notify, whether it be parents, the community, and maybe other individuals within your network. So we have our alert app. You could download it. You could see the emergency plans on it. You could do safe walks on it. You could talk to security on it. You could report incidents on it. The thing that's right here is really cool. This is our lockdown buttons. And for an institution that might have all of those systems in place, like the mag locks on the doors, speaker clocks, these speaker clocks are what we call AODA compliant. So AODA is an Ontario term for accessibility disability. And they flash lights, and the clock turns into a ticker with a message. So if you're deaf, hard of hearing, and that's a big speaker, and they're pretty loud. So when we hit the red button, the app sends out a message. The clock does everything it needs to do. Those doors we talked about automatically lock. Actually, there's another reason why I don't prop doors, because if it's propped, we do a lockdown, it's open. And all the systems work in place with each other. We just got these last week, this kit of boxes. So that's 50 of those clocks. Those 50 of those cost, I did the math, I did the conversion for CI, and it was $49,000. But this is the money you have to put into your institutions to make sure that you are at that level. We have a video in Canada too, and it comes from the University of Alberta. So that's a few provinces away. And this is their Run, Hide, Fight video. I'm not going to get into it, but that's the gold standard for Canada for teaching your staff. It's like 8 minutes. You know, there's a little warning at the beginning of it. There's a picture of a gun, somebody going through a library. There's not a bunch of blood and gore. There's a cool part, I think, where somebody takes a fire extinguisher and hits somebody in the head. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you have to protect yourself, you have to do what you have to do. So it's kind of our gold standard for what we show to our institutions. So will it happen? Yeah, it happened to us about 3 months ago. And after it happened, this is the text message I got from one of my closest friends at another college. I heard you had a gunman outside, and you sent everybody outside. And I'm like, that's exactly what happened, but let me tell you why, and it'll make total sense. So 3 months ago, I'm in a meeting at one of my campuses out of Brampton, and my whole team's at this meeting because we were actually shooting a video for our department at this one campus. And we're on a meeting, and somebody sends me a message during the meeting and says, your campus at your other location's in lockdown. And I said, what? And then somebody else in the meeting said, yeah, I just got the notice on the app. I said, okay. And then because we're so close-knit at our institution, and I'm talking about case management, I'm talking about those people you work with, I started getting messages from my IT team. Is this real? What's going on? Do you want me to clear it? I said, no, don't clear it. And I did kind of the worst, not the worst thing, but I called my security team in our call center and I said, hey, what's going on? And as I called them, I could hear the phones ringing in the back end because everybody else is calling the same thing. And they said, yeah, police called us, said lockdown, we don't know why. I said, perfect, let's go. Doesn't matter, just we need to make these things happen immediately. There's no time to waste. And so what ended up happening on campus, and I've kind of worked this in here a little bit, when it happens, not if it happens. Again, I was knocking on wood at the school the other day. Hopefully it doesn't happen at our institutions, but when it does happen at the institutions that impact us, we need to know how to support those individuals. So what happened on campus was somebody stole a car. It's a big thing in Canada right now. Luxury vehicles are getting stolen. These guys are coming from Montreal and stealing cars, and the guy blows through. This is bad. Our camera is actually on our parking lot, but this was on the peripheral, so we kind of got it. I actually have a really good video of it. They blew through a red light, got T-boned at a stop sign. Car rolls. It's like a luxury Mercedes or Mercedes-Benz BMW. Guy runs through campus. He's on camera. This is a gun in his hand. And kind of the map of it is, here's the roadway. Here's our campus in the parking lot. So this camera is actually way over here. So that was okay. But he ran this way, and this is what people saw. Now, did he go to campus or did he go through the trails? We didn't know. So police call and say, do your lockdown. Okay. So we sent everybody outside. We have our notification system. So actually, this is the app that I showed you on my phone. Security Center, we were talking about the app that they use, right, and what they can do to work with their partners. We put out messages on our Twitter, on our social media. The police service in the area puts out their messages, all clear. When you're in the middle of a situation like this, you don't have the time to create detailed messages and tell people specifically what's happening and where it's going on. When we have those red buttons, it does one thing, lockdown. It doesn't say lockdown. Actually, you know what? They have 3 because it's per campus, but it doesn't say lockdown in this wing or lockdown inside or outside. It does one thing, so we did it. Police got him. They did get him out back. He went through the trails. It was what it was. Did anybody happen to catch how long that took from the start to the finish? Because I had it in the last 2 slides. Okay, you're really close. 22 minutes. 22 minutes until we cleared it at the school. But when you look, and I had those little red circles on the police Twitter notifications. Oh, by the way, we'll make sure that this presentation gets out so you could have that. But when I looked at the police notification and the times on that, 16 minutes, and I couldn't even get from one campus to another campus before it was cleared. For those who know Ontario, Abe, and I was driving down Oakville Road Trafalgar Road in Oakville, and I didn't even get to the campus. So 16 minutes. And if you have systems within your institutions where you have to get approval to send your lockdowns, you have to do manual processes to send notifications, that's minutes and minutes and minutes that you don't have. Because, I got that notice, you sent your people outside? Yeah, we sent people outside because that's all we knew at the time. But if we waited for confirmation, what if he was inside and we left everybody inside? I said, worst case scenario, you knew something was going on. So, community updates. I'm not going to go through this, but obviously as an institution, you want to let your partners know, this is what we experience, this is what's going on, here's your supports. You could probably pre-draft some of this in anticipation for an event down the road that'll save you time, and then edit it if you encounter something. If you don't encounter something, that's excellent, obviously. Something that I kind of bring back from the healthcare side of thing, solicit feedback. Ask your institutions, what did you experience? How did you feel? What do you think? This is a very healthcare thing because after every time we got engaged in an event on campus, typically with violence and mental health and patients, we brought everybody in, we said, okay, what did everybody do? What worked well? What didn't go well? We got some really interesting feedback because none of it was legitimate to changes that we were going to make, but it was interesting to hear the perception that people had from our institution. Well, the messaging wasn't appropriate. Well, what else did you really want us to say, given the amount of time and the information we had in the moment? It was not clear this was an active shooter situation. We don't typically use shooter, we use attacker. And you know what? There's an event. We told you there was an event taking. We should do drills for this. You know what? We try to do drills, and sometimes businesses don't want disruption to their operations. And as people who are ultimately responsible for emergency management for your institutions, you want to make sure that you are setting the tone. You're not asking them, hey, can I do a drill? You're saying, this is when we're doing a drill. The message should have said, this is not a drill. Also a little funny because when you have all the muffling noise of the alarm happening, if you hear the word drill, you don't think it's real, and then you stay put. So we've gone through all this. Didn't tell me which one to do, run or hide or defend. The speaker was too loud. My manager of security didn't greet me outside. This is one of the bigger differences between the post-secondary environment. We talked about this. The post-secondary environment, our young learners are adults. They are responsible for themselves. They need to make their own decisions. Depending on the scenario, the setting that you're in, yeah, you do have some responsibility. So you might want to tackle this one. Who's going to greet them outside? Who's going to tell them where to go? I think you actually brought this up, right? You're like, the parents need to know what the expectations are. That could be through the security app. That could be through your September campaign, and didn't receive the push notification. Just because you download the app doesn't mean you have the most updated version. You should be updating it. I have the apps for all of the colleges and universities in Ontario. And before I came here, I got one from University of Ottawa, which is a couple hours down the road. But then I know that they're doing their processes and it sounds good. Major takeaways for an institution, in my mind, who has all the systems in place. I have a lot of technology within my institution, and it works. Test your systems, annual testing. It says this here, drills, 1 year, minimum. And I mean, when I say testing, actually, we do this monthly. We do this monthly on a rotating basis because one month we'll do one wing, the next month we'll do the next wing, the next month we'll do the next wing, the next month we'll do all of outside. We find a lot of the time that contractors sometimes cut the lines to some of your speakers and things like that. Then all of a sudden you find, oh, half the speakers don't work because a line's been cut, right? So, and this is where some of the difference between the old analog systems are changed with the new digital systems. And the big thing I say about analog and digital with camera systems is that analog is like VHS. Okay, I'm not with a too young of a group, so you guys still know what VHS is. But the new digital is like live streaming, right? And the nice thing with the new digital systems that are out there, assuming that you have the right infrastructure on the back end, as soon as something goes down, an emergency phone dies, a camera gets cut, anything like that, the ping to the device, the ping stops, and then somebody gets a notification, hey, your device is dead, what's going on? So make sure your administration understands the roles and responsibilities. We closed our campus that day. It was 3:30 that we had our lockdown. We closed our campus, and then everybody was up in arms. And I'm like, how productive do you think people are going to be coming back at 3:30 to finish at 4 when we just had a lockdown? Send everybody home, call it a day, send out your messaging, make sure everybody's well. You can take a bit of a loss on your operations. Training, drills, community messages. What would we have done differently? My answer here is nothing. I wouldn't have done anything different. There's actually one thing that we learned from this event that we actually changed. And so when the guards initiated that red button lockdown and hit it, and then we got them to send out the message to clear it, their permission levels on both of the alarms were the same. It didn't supersede. And so if you know technology, I don't know, this is as much as I know. If you don't have another rule that supersedes it, they both play at the same time. So then my IT guy logged in, he changed it, and then he created a level of like one higher to make sure that the all clear superseded the lockdown. School bullying. This is actually something that the Security Center has been asking me a lot to cover. It's obviously you care about the community, the young adults, the children. And so there's one particular case, actually there's a few I'm going to cover from mostly the States. Diego Stoles, student at a middle school in California, sucker punched by two other males, a long history of bullying, fell to the ground, hit his head, internal bleeding. After a couple days in the hospital, I don't even know if it was days, passed away. Wrongful death lawsuit against the institution, not necessarily against the two other boys. And we'll get into why it was against the institution. And, the teenage boys, 47 days in jail. This is a lot like Canada too. The youth criminal justice system is still a lot about restorative justice as opposed to retributive justice, but it doesn't make up for the loss, right? Part of the reason why the institution was found to be at fault for this was there's a history of over a year of Diego and his family reporting bullying to his institution. We've gone to, since 7th grade, we've gone to science teachers, guidance counselors, assistant principals. The previous occurrences were on the security camera systems, and nobody captured that, nobody reviewed it. If you have the footage, save it. We save anything out of the ordinary because in Ontario, there's a statute of limitations on filing things like a lawsuit against the institution, say for a facilities matter, a slip and fall. So we save things because the amount of lawsuits that come in 2 years minus a day on things like slip and falls, and then our guards have turned over and people are gone, but we still have the footage, right? So you want to make sure you're saving your footage. None of it was saved. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back one slide because the little bit of footage of this actual fight was taken from some friends because so many people knew about the bullying and what was about to happen that the friends took the footage. That went on YouTube. So they filmed Diego's death. Going forward, met with the assistant principal, acknowledged the issue. Yeah, we know you're being bullied. We're sorry. We're going to find a solution here. We're going to put you in a different setting. We're going to suspend them. We're going to address the behavior. We're going to make sure that upon their return, you guys are not engaging with each other. That's actually a reasonable response, I'm not going to lie. Because again, back to my point, when we have behavioral or conduct issues with our students or anybody else that are in your community, we're trying to find solutions. And what happened? When he returned to school, they were still there. The school didn't do anything, right? So pretty concerning. And the reason I flagged this case in particular, it's all over the news right now because it just happened. The largest lawsuit for bullying in the United States in history, $27 million. So that's the biggest one yet. And the headlines are pretty shocking. And we're going to talk about risk in a bit. But when I talk about risk, we talk about reputational risk to our institutions, financial risk to our institutions, and the well-being of our community. Those are the big three. This is the big three right here. 27 million, still not enough. You know what I mean? Like, family lost their son. The headlines: biggest bullying settlement, largest bullying settlement, landmark settlement. Students who served 47 days. Yeah. And are there other cases? Absolutely. So some of these you may be aware of. One of them intimate to ourselves in Canada, across the board, right? So students and mental health and bullying. We did a little segment with the Security Center the other day. Some really good questions about bullying. What are the signs and symptoms, and how do we know when bullying is taking place on campus? Post-COVID, right? Social media, what's happening? The kids are on their devices. The result of us being in an online world for the last little bit has really reduced our social skills and increased our dependence on technology. And so we talked about some of the signs and symptoms and what you can do. And so the people that know our young adults the best, or children or young adults or friends or whatever the case may be, are not only the parents, but they're the teachers and the classmates. And you're really looking for a change in the baseline behavior of an individual. So when they're becoming secluded, when they're on their social devices more, when they're getting upset off of their social devices, it's not still completely unreasonable not to friend, if you're a parent, friend your child on Facebook. The kids aren't on Facebook as much anymore, but to know what they're doing online, to try to find a common understanding of what they're doing online, so that when they're presenting what their interests are, that you have a bit of a better understanding of what those interests are, because you're communicating with them and understanding that. So Tyler Clemente, Jessica Logan, Megan Meyer, Ryan Halligan is his last name, Carol Todd and Amanda Todd. So Amanda Todd was a student who was involved in what we call a sextortion case. And it's still pretty common now, especially from our institution with our international students. You go online, you build a relationship with somebody, you think you know who they are, they ask for intimate photos, you send them, and then they turn around and use that for blackmail. Just last week I had one, right, with an international student, and it's basically them saying, oh, if you don't send me money, I'm going to send all your intimate pictures to your friends list, because it does not take much to find friends lists on social media. And the student comes forward and says, I've already sent them $500. It's like, yeah, that's really unfortunate. There's probably no way to get that money back, no way to identify who did that, but let's just hope that that's the lesson at the end of the day, and that there's no negative outcome out of it. And at that point, we're putting a lot of resources into the mental health of those individuals to make sure that they're okay from that. Amanda Todd took her own life. This was 10 years ago. And I, we had Carol Todd, the mother, come to a conference with all the colleges and universities in Ontario, and she had an hour to speak, and she was nearing the end of her hour, and she says, how much more time do I have? And I said, I'm standing beside her, as much time as you want. She says, I could go the whole day. And you could feel the pain, right? And she just had so much information. So I Google what's going on, and I Googled this late last week, and the articles are still taking place. Man sentenced 3 days ago. Endowment fund, that's great. It's 2 weeks ago. Upholds the pre-trial publication ban 4 weeks ago. Things are still happening now. This was 10 years ago. Sentencing delay this summer. Yeah, it's re-traumatization, right? It's quite upsetting, and with our kids, young adults going online quite a bit more, the risk is there. So what I'm going to do is, Amanda Todd put out a video on YouTube. Has anybody ever seen that? It's a silent video. I'm going to play it in the background. There's no music, no nothing. It's her showing cue cards of the story of her life. We'll do our first Q&A session. I'll stand here, we'll do some Q&A, ask away. I know the drinks are going to be there. It's warm, but For Canadian, it's warm. I'll let you watch that, and then if we have any questions, we'll ask away. But let me get this running here. And this was before she took her own life. Call for help. So speaking of things you're looking out for in young adults, the calls for help. Somebody needs to answer that. While this is going on, I know we covered a handful of topics. There's going to be a few more. A lot of you are watching that. That's fine. It's, I think, 8 minutes. But any Q&As? Any questions so far on some things? Yeah.
There was that question, why did you send students outside when you had a shooter outside?
Yeah. Yeah, so the question was the text message I got. I heard you guys had a lockdown with the gunman outside of campus and you sent everybody outside. We did, because ultimately our systems do one or two things. When you hit the red button, it sends everybody outside. Now we do have two other buttons we can hit. And one of them is a hold and secure. That's keeping everybody inside, which is really applicable to a lot of the environments around here, right? You want to keep everybody inside because you know the risk is outside. That could be a gunman outside, that could be an animal outside. The police didn't know, based off of that angle that I showed you the person ran, if they were in or out. So we just did the easiest thing we could do. All of the feedback came back after the fact. We knew so much more once it was done. It was on my way to campus, I got messages on Microsoft Teams. I got text messages, I got phone calls. And in another presentation where I go over a lot more of it, I think it was like 40 some communications I got in the 10 minutes it took me before it was cleared, right? 4 of those communications were with my security team asking for updates. So, okay, so it was a car, it was a car theft and a T-bone. Okay, the person had a gun. Oh, okay, the person was found running towards campus, but we don't know if they're in the bush or if they're in the school. And then the last phone call was the police got him. Okay, and they were asking, do we lift the lockdown? I said, okay, let's make sure there's nothing else going on in the institution before we lift and stop the messaging. So could we have put out a message saying hold and secure, stay in the building? Yes, but if we told everybody to stay in the building and he was in the building, that would have been just as bad. So it was, we considered changing the message once we realized he wasn't in the building, but it was 10 minutes at that point and the event was 16. So to go through and change the messaging, create more confusion, I think that really speaks to doing the drills, making your community aware of kind of these types of events and concerns. This is tough. It's just the world we live in. There's violence, there's behavioral issues. We're going to talk this next session a little bit about the drug use that's going on, and getting to the young people before they get out into the working world is important. So I'm in the colleges and universities. You're in we call them K through 12. I don't know if you still call them that here, but the grade schools, the community engagement that you're doing. When I went to Ignatius 2 days ago, I was specifically asking questions about what are the opportunities of opening the campus to the external community, because that just creates that bond with everybody in your area, right, outside of the gates. And I think part of that was also, as I was talking to the security center the other day, celebrating the things that your young adults are doing so they get the support, the recognition they need. Because you know who else is really bad post-COVID with social media is the parents, right? And they're not paying enough attention to the children. So when the children are having bad days, you're connecting with them. And when they're having good days, you're acknowledging that and rewarding that and giving them a pat on the back. So yeah, it's not ideal, but if you start doing some preparation, engaging in those drills, you're doing a lot more. Yeah. I know there's a microphone going around now. Otherwise, I'll repeat the question. Okay, it's good.
Just through a 911 lens, how do you find this particular product, the Sheridan app, is it called? How does that kind of like its interoperability from a 911 perspective in terms of sending alerts or messages, but at the same time, what are the dependencies of that? Obviously, I would like to know a little bit more about it, but for that to be able to expand into when we talk about bullying, this expands to putting cameras on buses. This expands to panic buttons at the administrative desks if there are irate parents or some susceptibility to violence. How does this particular app be able to kind of work and speak to from a first response perspective?
You mentioned 911, and we have a lot more integration on the back end of our institution. then anybody would never know. This isn't linked into necessarily a telephone system, although there are like email capabilities and then, shortcuts for phones for dialing. What we do have on campus, and I'll get back to some of the other concerns you brought up in a second. What we do have on our campus is integration through our hardwired phone system on campus. So if you pick up a podium phone at a teacher's desk and dial 911, any combination of 911 that sends an email to us and it tells me 911's been dialed, campus, floor, classroom, podium phone. Campus, floor, teacher's office, name of the teacher, right? And so it sends that to the management team in an email. It sends it to all the sites, and so they respond. They actually have a response protocol where the guards show up and check out an area, and it's the same for panic alarms. Hey, you guys dial 911, you okay? Yeah, I'm good. Okay, cool. And they'll come back in about 5 minutes just to make sure that nobody was coercing you or anything like that. So some of this is trial and error because it's like, we have to do this process because something has happened in the past. And we kind of mentioned this with a few folks. It's like, it'd be a shame something bad enough had to happen that then people are realizing we need to put some systems in there. The capabilities of these apps, there's a few of them out there. I was talking to Abe about the services they have. And I mean, you have everything from anonymous reporting. And this is a big thing with the kids too, right? Yeah. They don't want a tattletale. They don't want to be seen as, oh, I told them so-and-so, right? So anonymous reporting. I got one just before the presentation started. It's like, oh, people are smoking on campus. It didn't say who it was, but I mean, whatever. It creates a sense of community where you can reach out to security, say, hey, I saw something that shouldn't be happening, because we're smoke-free now in Ontario in most public places. Yeah, it's not a huge one, it's smoking, but I mean, it's a way for somebody to reach out to us. You gotta just basically offer every service possible, right? You could use a phone off a podium, you could use an app. I have a list of 10 different ways people get a hold of security. Here's our direct phone number, here's where our office is, here's our website. You could do the same stuff on the website. You could ask us for a safe walk. We could geotag you if you give your permission off of your phone and you're walking home. Yeah. So there's so much more, and there might be one or two aspects that I missed, but keep asking. And cameras, we're relying on technology for so much, analytics, server space. Where can technology be when the guards aren't there? We're not going to talk about it today, but the next COVID, how could we leverage technology to support us during the next COVID or the next pandemic? COVID might come back, hopefully not. But like, what are we going to do? I spent $1.4 million on security services during COVID to screen people in and out of the campus, and that's just out the door, right? I mean, that company made a lot of money, and those guards made some salary, but could I have bought technology? So there's a lot more out there.
There's got to be a balance between what's worth stealing from your campus to the investment that you're going to make, and at what point do you make yourself a target?
Yeah, it's a good question, because people who will commit crimes are looking not to get caught, right? So right off the bat, throwing cameras and lightings in certain area, am I going to commit a crime where there's a camera and a light right there, or it's nice and dark and shaded over here, right? So right off the bat, there's immediate benefit. But there's also some best practices, right? When we're at the school yesterday, we're looking at some cameras, and it's covering the main areas where the main activities are taking place. Awesome. When I look at a bigger institution like myself or a jail, you're probably considering that cameras are watching the main traffic in the main corridors. But the reality is that you're not going to have a camera in somebody's individual office. What you want to be able to do, though, is make sure that, again, the value of the camera is providing a purpose. So if somebody's going to walk into my facility, I know what door they walked in, what they looked like, which corridors they went down. Now, if they go in an office, they get to do what they want to do. But because we also have a concept where we don't monitor the performance of our employees, we want them to feel safe in the environment that they're working in, and we're not watching them. We really do not have time to watch 800 cameras and 3,000 employees at our institution. And then, will things happen in those offices? Sure. Some minor stuff. Candy stolen out of a desk, pocket change stolen off a desk, food taken from a fridge. Sometimes it's unfortunate. And I say to the people that are complainants in those cases, it's like, you should be aware of your own surroundings and what you're leaving out in the open. If somebody's taking food out of your fridge, they might need it more than you, but like, it still doesn't make it right. But you just have to kind of make a decision on what the value of that is. At some point, we're going to talk about return on investment. You don't actually see the dollar amount. You put in $10,000 of cameras. It's not like 3 years down the road you get $10,000 back. But the cost of the litigation after the fact is just $27 million case. This one that I have in front of me here, University of Arizona. This was a report that came out January of this year. It's an interim report. So when I said inquest, this is an inquest. And basically they were managing a case without case management, like I kind of laid it out. They were managing a case through individual departments who failed the institution. The student ended up coming back on site and killing a teacher. They were actually looking for 3 more teachers. One had just left, one was out of country. And because the person couldn't find the other teachers, they took it upon themselves to end it. And when you look at the feedback after the fact, there's a committee that did the inquest. The committee categorically rejects the self-serving assertions that the institution satisfied their duties. It's pretty damning. At the very least, these units failed to address ongoing harassment, ignored violence risks. The university failed to install a robust risk management system to monitor, assess, address, communicate violence risk to the institution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of information in here. University inactions in leadership response since the murder have further eroded trust, including trust to report safety concerns and mitigate anticipated violence. Yeah, you don't want to be in the middle of that. That's an extra copy, I'll leave it there. So yeah, some cost considerations, and there'll be some benefits on the back end for sure.
We're from health, and we're looking at some facilities or the establishment of one facility that I'm supposed to be in charge of.
Yeah, and sorry,
care.
you're from who? With who?
Ministry of Health.
Ministry of Health, because we're going to talk about some stuff in that
Right.
session. Okay, good.
So, how adaptable is the app to facilities that will have clients who are vulnerable? And I'm talking about clients with mental health issues that are high risk for suicide. That's one. And the other one is when you spoke about infrastructure, I didn't hear you mention the fence came up, but there's virtual fence.
Yeah.
And how effective is it in a facility that you have certain amount of clients that you have to deal with that are at high risk of certain behavior?
Yeah.
And that's one question. And the other one,
Okay.
if you can remember all of these,
Got you.
are considering the CCTV
Yeah.
and the use in facilities. I know there's an issue with human rights and confidentiality. I was just talking to my colleague, she who is responsible for data protection and other things, that it becomes a little bit invasive. But considering the type of clients that you may be looking at, I mean, we have a client, suppose we have a client who is suicidal.
Yeah.
Yes, the device is external. It's in the dining area or somewhere.
Yeah.
Cannot go in the room, but that is where also a high risk of the behavior occurring.
Yeah.
So are there any considerations as it relates to how we can offer some amount of protection without being so invasive? I hope you remember all of those.
I love it. I'm starting with that one in particular because I came from the hospital environment and security management, and I was the one that got the cameras into the mental health patient bedrooms because the amount of risk in those rooms that we saw based off of the case data that we were running showed that the value of the cameras versus the risk for the privacy was just outweighed. And so we kind of had this concept in Canada, and I hope it's global, but safety trumps privacy, especially with information sharing, right? So ultimately, if you sharing information with somebody reduces the risk, that's what you do. Safety trumps privacy, hands down. It's in the Occupational Health and Safety Act in Ontario. It's known across the institution. Now, you don't just go and implement cameras wherever you want. And specifically when you're talking about healthcare environments, you have privacy agreements with your privacy office in your institutions, use of camera procedures, who uses them. When you have teams that monitor the cameras, you have basically a sign off with your teams. That's part of the training with the security center too, right? Because you're going to be subject to some confidential information, and you're signing an agreement saying that if any of that is breached, we'll be following up with you. Maybe not in those words, but you know what I mean, right? So as long as you do all your due diligence checks and everything you need to do, you've done what's responsible and expected of yourself as an institution. So have we put cameras in patients' rooms? Yes. We've had cameras in mental health units pointing at nurses' desks. Going back to the school environment, and I said, oh yeah, we don't put cameras on people's desks. Where we do have cameras is actually where all the counseling happens and where the nursing happens, because we just have incidents in history of escalating events that we want to make sure that, again, if somebody pushes a panic button, that we get to look at the camera to see what's going on before we send a security guard in there, because we're unionized with a lot of our security guards, and they'll say, hey, listen, if we are going into a situation that you're telling me is escalated, I need to know that I'm safe too, right? So you just got to basically run through all those scenarios and say, in this scenario, we will do this, in that scenario, we won't do that. And I might even have some more thoughts about cameras later, but let's go back to the app. And so the purpose of what you want to use the app for, you can curate it the way you want it. Especially, we used our app, our Sheridan Alert app during COVID, to screen for vaccinations, right? So you add a platform on there, you work with maybe another third-party vendor, you say, okay, this vendor has all of the information, all of our health information that we all got vaccinations. They're gonna go through the app, and you get your QR code, then you come into the building, you scan your way in, and it's good to go. So we used our app for that. You could use your app for check-ins, for lists, for assessments, for confidential purposes, for emergency procedures. And so when we go on here and say the lockdown happens on campus, and we talked about the parents, right? Because sometimes the parents are more challenging than the students, but the parents can download the app, and if we have a lockdown on campus, they can go and read through that. In the next session, we're going to talk a little bit about a concept called CEPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And when you go and do some of these certifications that I've been through, they actually give you specific guidelines about how far the fence should be away from your building. And in certain circumstances, how far should the fence be buried underground so that people can't get under it, right? And how tall it should be, right? So that's when you bring in the experts. There's a bit of a trade-off, because naturally, the fence defines the boundary of your institution. It lets people know when you're on this side of the fence, you're outside of our institution. When you're on this side, you're in. It also offers a guideline for people to know where they can enter your institution. They follow the fence line till they find the gate. So overall, it's a positive thing as long as it matches kind of the branding, you keep the upkeep of it. Fences can be beautiful, but it's also a natural deterrent, like I said earlier, especially if it's, some of those hedges on the outside of your soccer field are pretty tall. I wouldn't be jumping it, but it'll deter a lot of people. They'll go do what they do somewhere else.
But the key is, these are virtual. There is no physical, apart from it's just an electrical connection from one post to the other. Have clients that will.
Oh, is it set up with like a speaker somewhere, or was it doing?
Like
Yeah.
a post that connects an electrical field around the facility.
Yeah.
It's not visible to the clients. So we find that depending on the client, we may have them going through that facility, that thing. There may be an alert, but then again, it still poses a high risk. Yes, there'll be security cameras there watching, but I'm still going to have to get staff that will meet our security personnel to go after. Is it?
Yeah, it sounds like at least somebody's, sorry.
Yeah.
Somebody's gone through the thought process of putting something in to try, and if it's not doing what you're intending for it to do because of the data showing, then you need to try something new. Because if it's not working, I might be speaking to somebody in the room, I'm not sure, but if it's not working the way you're hoping for it to work, then I mean, at what point does it get to a serious enough event that you look back and you say, we were negligent now because we knew this was a risk? Hey, I got a few more follow-up points from the first half of what we were talking about. You asked about the app integration with 911. You know what? If you can conceive it, there's a way of things working, and I'll explain it the way that we're doing things first. With everybody in the remote world working online on their devices, I gave you this concept about our employees dialing 911, and I get an email about it. We know where it's coming from. Well, what happens when that's happening when people are on Microsoft Teams? And I don't know what the predominant tool is that people are using in the online remote world here, if it's Teams or Zoom or whatever it might be. But we actually found a vendor who will be able to grab IP address information from you when you're on your device on Teams, and let the 911 dispatchers know if you're calling from Northern Ontario, Southern Ontario, East, West, like kind of a general area, and they'll dispatch you to the right 911 service. And so I didn't say too much in the first half because I didn't know if the app that the security center utilized was similar to the ones that we utilize, and actually it's probably a little bit more robust now that Abe's doing live demos at the table. He's gonna, it's okay, he doesn't have to pay attention. So like similar features, right? So if you're out in the community, you can utilize the app, you can send messages to the company, you'll get responses. And the people that are monitoring the app for what you're submitting will report back to you as appropriate, maybe connect with you for additional data if you're providing contact information. And again, if you can conceive it, if there's an opportunity to work with police services to share information, to have a database of reports, I'm being told that the information about this particular app will be shared along with a slightly redacted presentation here because we're getting into open source intelligence investigations, and I did run one. We'll share that, and then there might be one or two more documents that I'll look to share, just to kind of give you a baseline of some of the audit tools or investigative reporting tools that you could start to build within your own institutions to grab some of that data and see where the trends are going. Oh, and the other thing was this case that happened where somebody got an infrastructure budget right away. So down the road from us in Ontario, Canada, is another university. The name doesn't matter, but they had a really unfortunate incident about a month before we had our lockdown. And a month before we had our lockdown, they had an incident on campus. An international student entered a gender studies classroom. So it's a male international student at a university, enters a gender studies classroom and stabs a female teacher, female student, male student before being subdued. And very unfortunate event. And the community, they didn't know. People were coming out of class in the next room and saying, "What's all the commotion? What's going on? We don't know." About a week later, I see a job posting for that institution. It says Director of Infrastructure Security, budget $10 million. And you realize at that point, the reason the budget's so high is because they didn't have a lot of those systems we were talking about. We said it at the back table. It's really unfortunate that sometimes those incidents have to happen for you to get the systems that you need for the money you would have spent anyway, plus whatever litigation might be on the back end. So just some thoughts there. Talking to the Security Center, we wanted to talk about OSINT. OSINT's not necessarily a new thing. It's open source intelligence. It's the ability for us to learn more about other individuals through what's out there on the internet. You don't need to be a private investigator. There are tools and resources that you can use to find out more information. Some of them are paid. There are courses, that's fine. But it's public information. Public records, images, websites, social media platforms, news, media, libraries. And what we're ultimately, again, using social media investigations for is when I'm in the role of threat assessment, I want to learn more about an individual, their baseline behaviors, what's normal to them, what stands out. Maybe even if there's a certain point, we were looking at a case recently of an individual whose mother passed away, but they passed away during COVID. There was a correlation to vaccination to the Canadian government, which turned into a risk against the Prime Minister because of the thoughts around, you know what I mean? You know where I'm going with that? Like, oh, the government's making us have vaccinations and now my mother died as a result of XYZ. And you can use a lot of the social media to determine what's baseline behavior, where the concerns are around someone, and a lot more information. So the usual tools that we use for online social media investigations, Facebook, Twitter, now known as X, TikTok. Any of the more mature individuals in the room know what this logo is? That's Reddit. Reddit's my favorite one. The thing about Reddit is like, it's a social media platform where you have subgroups of special interest topics. I guarantee you, I haven't looked, I should have looked. I guarantee you there's a subreddit for Cayman Islands, right? And so it's locals and it's tourists and they're talking about what to do, what to see, what are the risks, what are the costs. Hop on that, see what people are saying. But these are people behind a social media blanket, so you don't know who they are, and they're just talking truth, right? So, or at least what their perceived truth is. So you learn a lot about what people's perceptions are of your institutions. LinkedIn, obviously a great one, find out a lot about people. What are the concerns with the usual tools? They're getting dated, some of them. It's hard to find a lot of our young adults on Facebook anymore. I remember logging in, I think, in '06 and permanently logging out in '09. There's nothing there for me. A lot of our parents and grandparents still have Facebook. A lot of our professionals use LinkedIn. But for the little bits of information that you can find during social media investigations, we call this concept cookie crumbs, right? So you find a little bit on one platform, you go to another, it starts telling you more of a story because you're getting that cookie. It's like, what is it? What's the one? They follow the cookie crumbs and then the wolf eats them. And yeah, so Hansel and Gretel, that's one of them, yeah. Anyway, so it's cookie crumbs. That's the concept. That's the terminology that's typically used. What's really important with social media investigations is that you want to corroborate your information based off of other information that validates it. I'll give you a couple examples in a bit. Some of the lesser known tools that the younger adults and children are starting to use now are platforms like VSCO. And so when you create profiles, they have, again, more cookie crumbs of information. Here's a name. Here's the name that matches those. Here's some pictures of the profiles. Once you click on the profiles, there's posts and followers and following. Actually, I think this is Instagram, but this person's Instagram actually has their VSCO profile. It's a video and editing app, probably a lot like Instagram, but it's just social media changes. The youth changes what they're using. If you haven't heard about it, it's being used. Zello. Zello is a walkie-talkie app. We actually use sometimes walkie-talkie apps in security. It was used for the Canadian protests, the convoy, for the anti-government, anti-vaccination. It typically uses QR codes to download the app. Once you get in, it kind of shows you channels that you can get on the convoy. It was also used in the January 6th invasion of Capitol Hill in the US with the whole Trump stuff that was going on. Very violent event. Your governments are tracking, and they are members, especially those ones in intelligence. They are members of that. They're monitoring it. But again, open source intelligence doesn't hurt if for whatever purpose that it serves you, you can be on this and investigating as well. Gathering information for yourself on your people and to support your institutions. Skype. Now you probably say, wait a minute, Skype's one of those old ones. Nobody uses that anymore. Skype was like the original, right? The original Teams, the original Zoom. You have these profiles and then you don't use them anymore. It doesn't mean you delete them. It was funny because way back when people used Skype, you actually had to register for it with your home address. So if you haven't deleted your profile, and I can find you now, I know where you live. It has your home address, your home telephone. And for the younger people in the room, the home telephone was actually connected to a wall in your house and all that. We had to use dials like this anyway. So somebody thought I was younger. I'm 38. Anyway, so no, I remember. Skype has a lot of information on it too. Has your birthday on it, so we know when your birthday is. Facebook Marketplace. So if you're selling anything on Marketplace. Now, I said Facebook, you could lock down your profile. Funny thing about Marketplace is it's kind of a back door into people's profiles, even if you have a private profile, because they want to optimize information sharing with the Marketplace and the usability of it. So you click on somebody with a private profile, but then they still have listings on Marketplace. You figure out what their trends and behaviors are. They're into motorcycles. I don't know if these are good ones. They're not the Harleys that are parked outside. It also tells you kind of the geographic location where somebody lives. So when you're looking at cookie crumb information, you're trying to figure out who's where and validating information on somebody. That's some pretty good information there. Joined Facebook 2007. A lot more tools, a lot more platforms. Blue Sky, Be Real. Be Real's a cool one. Not really, but what it does is it prompts you randomly to take a photo in the moment wherever you are. You have 30 seconds to do it because with Instagram it's all fake, right? That's not somebody's actual life. It's all edited. Be Real, my phone pops up, says take a photo right now. People are in the washroom, whatever. So there's lots of things that are out there. When this gets distributed later, feel free to hop on some of these tools, start throwing your data in, do a little bit of research. You'd be surprised what you find in yourself. So I talked to the security center. I was talking to Maria, and I said, can I look somebody up? And Maria says, look me up. And then she tells me later, she's like, I wasn't serious, but it's too late because I already looked her up. And so she's like, oh, there won't be that much. And so I said, well, Maria, here's what I found. All right, so Maria's Instagram, Cayman Maria. Okay, this is the slide we won't share with everybody. Facebook, Maria McLean. Individual links that go to back to Maria's account. Your mother-in-law. You know what? And some of this stuff, like, I'm saying, can I click it directly here? I might be able to. Yeah, mother-in-law. And so like you end up going through people's profiles to try to figure out if it's actually them. And you start scrolling photos and figuring out, hey, wait a minute, this looks familiar because Maria's daughter is a golfer. Maria's family's into that. You're looking through father-in-law, mother. I wasn't sure it was your mother until I saw the profile name Limerick Nana. And I'm like, okay, Limerick, the Irish. Okay, right. Yeah, so you're probably like a little surprised. It's not just finding out necessarily what people's social media is, but also where their images are. And so this whole advancement of AI is a little concerning, right? So there are sites that you can go to and drop a picture on of somebody. They will look at photos and analyze the internet to determine if one of these photos is you. Now, Maria's putting her glasses on, and bottom left, I don't think is Maria. Bottom right, I don't think is Maria. But I think the top three could be, and the bottom middle one could be. Is it not? Oh. Can I? Oh, yeah. Is that you top right? That's me. Yeah. Okay. So I got photos of Maria. Okay. Now I know I'm in dual screen mode. This is why. All right, let me exit that. And so then some of them take you to websites. I'm just showing you kind of the power of like AI. And then you go to where these photos are and you try to figure out a little bit about somebody. It's like, okay, well, what's Maria doing on this page? Is this actually you? Yeah? Yeah, so you're doing a family photo for some, yeah, and then like you're cross-referencing data, right? Because it's Cayman and so, yeah. It's my son on my back. Yeah, so unless your son's on, I don't know. Anyway, but I mean, so I'll get out of this because it actually goes pretty far. I can't exactly see where I am. I'm gonna have to drag the taskbar and bring it back. Information on, there's another site here. Epios, this bottom one. I might have skipped a slide, but Epios basically shows you where you've done Google reviews, which businesses you visited, what ratings you've given them, what geographical location it is. It lets you know if your information's been involved in a data breach. Found your Skype profile with Maria McLean, your Spotify profile, found all that. And then, yeah, your Epios search. So I won't go into all the extra stuff I found, but that's just a general idea of what it was. So I know your whole family now. We looked them all up. Your daughter's golf account, your son's golf account, everything. So it might not be the nature of what you're trying to do within your institutions, but if you find yourself at a point that you're looking at a person with concerns you have about them, you need to have a better understanding of who you're dealing with. Managing risk. Again, we're kind of quick firing a bunch of topics here. And so we mentioned this earlier, managing risk. Every day we're trying to manage the risk to the community, risk to reputation, and financial risk. And so that's inherently a function of the security departments that we work for, and we try to balance all that. What I'm going to try to do is give you an idea within my institution how we look at risk assessments for different types of activities on site and determine if it's acceptable risk or not acceptable risk. And ultimately, there is a very low appetite in the post-secondary environment to have additional risk to the students. We're balancing so much right now. The Canada-Ukraine impacts, the Israel-Hamas stuff that's going on. What's actually impacting us more on campus is the Canada-India relations. And so there were some comments made by the government, and what's the fallout going to be from that? The attention's been taken away. But we basically have to create plans that, depending on the type of escalation we see, we have to take certain actions. And so I mentioned those three risks. There's a bunch more, right? And so particularly for the student environment, student risk, but again, a lot of this does relate to other environments, financial, labor relations, non-compliance, competition. One of the categories that I don't have in here is insider risk It's a lot more prevalent, especially with us on the online world. We're working from home, our networks are vulnerable, people are becoming more distant from our institutions and the allegiances they have to their institutions. And so I'm going to give you a bit of a concept here that you can go back to your institutions and determine what's high risk and low risk. And to really determine what's acceptable and not acceptable is to input certain situations that you know are low risk, that you know are acceptable in terms of having take place on site, and throw some in there that are high to determine what your range is. And we kind of talked about, 0 to 5, 0 being low, 5 being high, and ultimately you could have a total score of 25. And it kind of fits into this chart here. So you're trying to determine what the impact is of the risk you have versus the likelihood of the risk. And obviously, low impact, low likelihood, do the events, have at it, have a great time. Severe impact, almost certain likelihood, is going to be very risky for your institution. And there's going to be times when you have to tell the people that work with you, and it's typically somebody higher up, hey, we can't run this event because our institution, it's going to be subject to too much risk. I like to use this little graphic sometimes. High probability, it's going to happen, but it's low impact, you go for it. When it goes down and down and down, low probability, high impact, you could probably go for it. High probability, high impact, you're not doing it, right? And so he's thinking, I need a big rock to fill this hole. So that's kind of the concept of risk and how we look at things. And so when we talked specifically for our campus and the unique needs for our campus, being the Canada-India relations right now, I ran out a whole scenario of 4 outcomes or 4 potential events that could take place, with the first being continue and maintain current operations, to the fourth being revert to COVID operations, and in that sense, we shut down the campus, send everybody home, go into an online world, and just abandon the physical facility, because particularly our one campus is in Brampton, where a lot of the international community from India comes to, which is fair. International students will travel to a community where they have familiarity. The 2 big ones in Canada, Brampton and British Columbia. British Columbia, not to get too much into the politics, but is where an assassination happened, Khalistani interest groups, and so we have to be involved with some of the politics, understanding what the impact is and what our community ultimately gets engaged with and is impacted by, which is really unique because then you have the Israel-Palestine politics happening. It doesn't impact our campus. We're not a political campus. 20 minutes down the road, 2 major institutions, York University and the University of Toronto, everyday protests and march and walk out of campuses. And they're not going to have much of a security department by the end of everything, which is not going to end soon. And then I want to talk a little bit about managing risk. I work with partners for our institution who will send us daily email updates of what's happening out there. Specifically, they're sending us what's happening out there across the world because our institution has people traveling across the world doing recruitment for our institution. So when I open up one of these emails like, Kenya, police fire tear gas amid student protests. Well, the student protests are probably to do with political situations or financial situations, but I have staff in Kenya recruiting students and I need to connect with them. The week before I came here, shooting in Orlando, and the person says, oh, I'm in Tampa. I'm okay. Perfect. But they send us that information. They send daily briefs, Russia invasion, Israel, Gaza. And then I had my partner with the security company, Mike, send me an email because we have one campus close to a city hall in Mississauga, Ontario. And he says, just so you know, this protest is happening. When you open up these alerts from these institutions, they typically give you some guidelines too, like don't travel, know where to go, know where your evacuation points are, here's our border crossings. And as I'm doing the research on the company that provides us services, found out you guys do services too. I didn't know that going to this presentation. So it's on your social media, it's on your website. So the Security Center does similar notifications. So if you're not getting those, figure out how to get on the mailing list, especially if you have your community impacted by students or users of the space who represent any of these areas where you're looking to travel. So connect with the Security Center about that. Crime prevention through environmental design was a big topic coming into this. A ton of concepts. We've already referenced a few of them, the fencing, the community engagement, the physical features of the building. And what crime prevention through environmental design is, manipulating the current design of your facility to reduce the amount of risk to it, right? So we've already talked about cameras and lighting and fencing. There's four kind of main concepts to it. So the physical, the social, the management of it, and supporting law enforcement directives. The key concept is really question everything and why it is where it is. You know, it really digs down if you do like a management course in SEPTED. Why are we even using the type of lights that are in the parking lot? What people also don't do enough of is go and do an assessment of your facility after hours. What does it look like at nighttime, right? Most of us work day shifts. Who's there at nighttime? Your security teams, right? So maybe there's a partnership opportunity there, but determining what you're trying to do, how to do it better, where the risk is, where the incidents are happening, and finding ways to mitigate that. So absolutely, when you do a proper assessment, it does tell you these shrubs are good because they stop the traffic, but those shrubs are bad because it offers a hiding space. Building your facilities, right? You know, making sure that you're engaged with your partners in security and protective services to make sure that it promotes the flow of traffic, doesn't really bring the negative activities on campus. You know, it's the reason why some of us have security systems on our house, not because we're ever going to use the security system, but as a criminal, I see that security system, that's not the house I'm going to do something to. When I'm talking about the categories of crime prevention through environmental design, also called SEPTED, natural. What's natural for the environment? So windows and unobstructed sight lines, see-through fences. So yeah, some concepts about fences still. Landscaping, service counters. Service counters are great because, like, you know, it offers an opportunity for you to stop somebody, but also know where to go for questions. Like, it's just one of those natural things that serves a lot of purpose. Mechanical cameras, motion activated lights, alarms, locks, laminated glass, you know, or frosted glass, right? So one of these things, the question was asked about cameras, like where do we find the balance of like the value versus the impact on the back end? Oh, absolutely. Music, casino floors. Why do they have ugly carpets? So you're looking at the slot machines, right? So music, do you want people in the area because you're encouraging that? Or, you know, I've heard of this concept a few times. Sometimes sonic frequencies are put through areas, and that might be some of the concept around the fencing. So actually dog collars, right? You don't want your dog to leave the yard because you've created this virtual fence. There's a lot of different ways. Laminated glass, for some reason, especially post-COVID, people feel a lot more comfortable that if this is my office, all of this is frosted, right? So nobody can see me. But then you have your security team patrolling and they can't see you and see if you're okay. So then they're gonna come and enter your space anyway. So it's a balance. What's the benefit to this? Security, police patrol, concierge, receptionist, technology. One of the big things that's happened in the shift of the security industry in the last 10 years, it's not what it was 10 years ago, right? So 10 years ago, all of my partners in healthcare were my size, ready to take patients down, tackle them, restrain them, do what we needed to do. And a lot came out of what was happening in the States a few years ago. I think, Gabby, you referenced a case. I don't need to reference a specific case, but there's been a lot of negative public perception from use of force with our police services, which kind of hurts because when we're from the industry, we know what's ultimately trying to be achieved, and we know across the board that our police partners are good, but obviously there's some unfortunate events. What we've done in our own institutions is removed a lot of our uniforming. We removed our bulletproof vests. We removed our handcuffs, our batons. We've given the guards some collared shirts, golf shirts, because they're customer service agents for your institution. Ultimately, they are an extension of your own institutions because they know just enough about every part of your institution to help guide somebody and give them information and be an extension of you. So when you have your security, it's not just to respond to the bad stuff, but also be there for the good stuff. Some of the strategies in play here, the border definition, controlled spaces. Some of this is going to kind of reflect what we talked about with fencing, right? You're out in the public on this side, but on that side it's somebody's property. Clearly marked transitional zones. Users know they're going from public to private. The design of space to increase the perception of natural surveillance. From this one location, I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 houses, 6 or 7 houses. it's something that we do subconsciously in security. You know, the security operative will typically sit in the corner of the room so they could observe everything. It's natural surveillance. It's effective. You're safer to put your safe activities, and this goes back to your risk score. You could put your safe activities in vulnerable areas, but if you have vulnerable activities taking place on your sites, put them in the safe areas, right? More public facing, more scrutiny from others if it's undesirable, let's say that. There's a ton of SEPTED strategies. So I'm talking more about the physical ones here, but also what we referenced earlier, community engagement, building a sense of relationship, a sense of purpose, inherent secondary purposes of your strategies. So we're doing this course, SEPTED Level 2, and we're going to do an assessment, and we're out in Mississauga, and we find this place. And it's actually a small strip mall, nail salon, bank, corner store, etc. And there's this concept about broken windows theory. And really broken down from the top down is, if the place looks like crap, people are going to treat it like crap, right? And so you go around this facility and you try to show the owner, hey, how can you reduce crime and risk in your area by taking a look at the concept of broken windows theory? So we have graffiti across the building. We have bins. I think one of these is a clothing donation bin that's off the curb. We have cement bench that's been broken for who knows how long. A no parking sign that's so faded that it can't be enforceable. You get your ticket, you take a photo, you go to the courthouse, they'll throw it out. This is where the shrubs don't make a lot of sense. Why are there all shrubs just along here? There's a sign on the ground, a tree that's broken down on the side. So trees good, trees bad. Again, all these bins that are disheveled. The signage that also doesn't line up with the intended use of the space. The signs, I know it's small. Please keep gate closed at all time, and the gate's open and nobody's there. All of the bollards that are here serving no purpose. It looks like junk. Funny enough, when we were here and I stepped in here, I was looking around and I found a steak knife tucked in at the top of this little area. And I'm like, oh, look, I found a knife. And somebody made a joke, oh, it's probably from a crime. Now, I know that they were probably putting it there because they were breaking down boxes. But I mean, if I could find that, who else is going to find that knife? And then when something happens as a result of that, what's the inquest going to look like? Who's going to say somebody failed the system with the doors open, the knife there, the place looking like this? So they could probably reduce their risk by 400% by fixing all this right off the bat. So what you're probably thinking is, how do I do a SEPTED assessment on my site? And these things really come holistically and natural, right? It means going out with your partners and walking around, and back to my point earlier, question why things are the way they are. Why is this sign here? Why are these steps like this? Why is this railing not here when it should be? What I will share when we send out some of this documentation is my audit for my panic alarms on site. Now, it's not categorized as a SEPTED assessment, but when you start going through these things, you're picking up on SEPTED qualities, and this is exactly why I made this. I made our panic alarm assessment based off of the hotel industry, because it's the cleaners in the hotels that are by themselves going into the rooms. And so a lot of this content came from the hotel industry. But when you fix a lot of the root cause of the issues, you're not going to need the panic alarms because you fixed the problem. You're essentially doing a SEPTED assessment. This is a small snippet of it. I think I have 65 or so criteria that I review. And especially when you do this with your community partners presently there with you and you're talking to them, you learn a lot more. Like, okay, when's the last time as a department that you talked about security issues? Well, we don't do that. Well, why not? Okay, so it's post-COVID. When's the last time you guys have done customer service training? Well, why do we need that? Well, because people are getting escalated. You need to know how to de-escalate them, right? Again, crime control theater, that second slide, something happens, people are like, give me a security guard. Well, do you have de-escalation training? Do you have this? Do you have that? These are the questions, right? So just a few general ideas. What does the area look like for lighting? Somebody says, yeah, when I work at nighttime in the parking lot, it's so dark. Like, there's probably a reason why it's dark. Access point, mechanical defects to the areas of the door, the whole concept about the doors being propped and they're not working right. So it's not that people can access your area, it's because the door's been used for the wrong purpose that we were talking about earlier. Is there a gap in capturing who has access to CCTV or where the cameras are? Are the devices too far away? Are they 100 yards, 200 yards? it's fair to do an assessment because, again, I talked about the security industry in general being different than it was 10 years ago. You know, you build a building on your site, you have the infrastructure, but then you expand that building and you don't touch the infrastructure. Well, you need to modify that. You should do assessments of that. So I think it's fair to, and I'll share this, but it's fair to just question why things are where they are. And if the data supports it, start moving it around. These are CEPTED assessments you can do. We've somewhat referenced it earlier. Your case management information, who's doing what, where your case is spiking. Building a case for your security department. I've heard a few people say it, you know, how am I going to tell my institution that I need $1 million for my security team, right? Physical security team, infrastructure security team. You got to start collecting the data. What I will send you as part of all this is a blank file. And now my incident reporting metrics have a lot more categories in them. I just grabbed kind of the hot stuff. And not only kind of keeping track of what incidences are happening on your site, but how long is that taken away from your team? Because ultimately I'm doing a calculation on the back end of how much time that's taken from my team. This was my September stats. And again, September being the first month of the school year, right? So 30,000 people. Emergency phones went off 101 times. And you really need to know your data. Out of 101 times, probably only 5 of them are real, because you know what people love to do in the building is walk by an emergency phone hidden and walk away. And you got to be able to explain that data too. Medical first aids, it was a lot, but we have a great response program with the institution, including EMS and fire. Other alarm responses for panic alarms and areas that have secure doors, access calls, tons of access, tons of patrols. What's really interesting on the back end too, I don't know if I reference it on this slide or the next, but you know what, I'll find a point to reference it anyway. Oh no, here it is. You can also break this down by the operative on your site. So that might be a physical security guard, but it might also be one of your officers in your facility. Now, you don't want to be using data like this for performance management. If you do that, people are going to feel like they're being monitored, but ultimately you could make some assumptions and assertions based off of how people are performing. So this is one of my sites. T1 and T2 are my supervisors. The rest are our staff. And you know what? If somebody was having low numbers, I might try to find out why. Are they not sending you out? Are they not engaging with you? Do you sit in the office too much? But also, I think I said this earlier, acknowledge the achievements, successes of those who really stand out from the rest. And on a monthly basis, when I get these numbers, I send out to the whole team. You know, I cross-reference T42 is this guard. I send them a message, hey, you had a really busy month. I really appreciate it. They love that. We have 8,192 hours a month. And then in Ontario, we have labor law, which means that you get half an hour break plus half an hour lunch, 2 15-minute breaks. So that comes down to 7,500 hours of working time. And then after I calculated all the incidences for the month, that left us with 5,000 hours. But then you got to consider, outside of the incident, you also have to consider how much time it takes for your guards to write the reports. So I typically double it, right? It takes me 5 minutes to do a door unlock, but then it also takes me 5 minutes to go into the notebook, go into the reporting system, say I opened the door for so-and-so, because we all know what happens after the fact. Who let the door open? Well, I did, and it was for so-and-so, and here's the report. So after I calculate how long it takes the guards to do the reports, I'm down to 2,700 hours of the guards' time that is not accounted for. And that actually is about a third of the total hours we have for guard services. That's a pretty good number. Anything lower than that, I start getting concerned, because you need that third of time for all the other interactions your staff are going to have. Again, my comment about security services being more frontline customer service, I want them spending that time out and talking to people and engaging with people, getting to know them, having those chats, right? So you want to build a case for your security departments, start running some numbers, start capturing some data, start working with your vendor to determine what the best fit is for your institution. And I might have mentioned this already, but people are asking, what should I be spending? What you should be spending is what the recommendations probably are coming from the security center saying, based off of your facility, this is what we think you need. It's got to be a partnership. It's got to be communication. Other data you can use, what areas of the facility are getting the most amount of use and at what time, right? So the colleges are open actually 5 a.m. till 11 p.m. And And so there's no classes at 5 a.m., but that's when the guards start doing their unlocks. So we do have less staff after hours because it starts to go green and yellow, or green and less green over here. But then in the middle of the day, we have more staff in the middle of the day. That's typically your supervisory staff, because when more things are happening, you want more oversight there. But if you could provide any of these metrics to the security center, then they can make better recommendations to say, well, this is what you should have on during these hours. And I love it's been around for a few years, this whole technology solution. I love the concept of outside of those hours, here's what we can offer you. You have your cameras doing what they're doing. We have our mobile response team doing what we're doing. And it typically comes with cost savings. So knowing how your institution breathes in and out. And for me, when I do this at my sites, I do this by campus, by day of the week, by term. Summer semester is like, for us, it is May to the end of August, and that's 50% capacity of the institution. So I do downstaff a bit, but I don't downstaff too much. Next topic, naloxone. It's a shame that this is going to be just a quick one. We talked about this at the security center this morning. I had a bunch of team members that wanted to come in, and they approached me and said, what do you have on? I said, well, this is really funny because in Ontario, because I came from the healthcare side and I joined the colleges, and I said, how come nobody has it? And everybody says, well, what is it? I said, okay, so let's start talking about it, right? So naloxone is the name of the drug that stops opioid overdoses. And opioids being your typical painkiller drugs, right, that people are overdosing on. They do prescribe it from the healthcare environment. It initially came out in injection form. We don't typically see that in Ontario anymore, at least not from the public user. But now, so more, it's in the nasal spray form. It's becoming like really bad, where drugs are being cut with fentanyl. That's kind of the go-to big name of it. Drugs are being cut by fentanyl, and people are dying. And here is the overdose amounts, just for a bit of a concept. Heroin, this is how much you need to overdose. That's 1 inch, so 1.5 inch bottle, so that's not much heroin. Fentanyl, depending on your body size, your tolerance levels, that's how much is going to kill you. For the people that weren't at the security center this morning, anybody know what carfentanil is?
Elephant tranquilizer.
You were there this morning. Elephant tranquilizer. People are taking this stuff. I don't know why. My numbers are going to be a little bit off because I thought the Cayman population was 70,000, and somebody corrected me this morning and said it's 83 or whatever it was. So, yeah. But this is close. So 4,000 people in Canada die a year, which is about 5% of the Cayman population. And in 2021, 106,000 people in the States died, which, given the new numbers I know about, is probably about 140% of the Cayman population passing away in the United States every year because of drug overdoses. I don't think the slide is in the same presentation that we had this morning, but more people are dying from opioid overdoses than they are from breast cancer now. Yep. This is a condensed version. You know what though? I provided my presentation to the security center, so if you want to talk more about it, it's really common that our security officers, our police, our EMS services all carry naloxone on them. It's an interchangeable term, naloxone and Narcan. It's kind of like when you got your COVID vaccine and the brand is Pfizer, but the actual drug name is something else. That's kind of the relationship. Narcan is the drug, naloxone's the company, or vice versa. I can't remember. I think it's the other way. Naloxone's the drug. When we were talking about it in Ontario, we were looking at the numbers and we were trying to determine how prevalent it was, right? So this is where some of the more of the youth numbers come in, and figuring out how many of them are using it in the GTA. About 11% of youth are using prescription opioids for non-medical use. When you get to the street entrenched individuals, the homeless individuals, it doubles, and the numbers are going up and up and up. This data goes back to 2013, but this bottom area is cocaine, alcohol, and benzo. And then this is opioids, went through the roof. And so if that was 2013, 10 years ago, you could probably think of where it's going now, especially given that, yeah, more than breast cancer, that's a lot. So how does naloxone work, the drug? Basically, these are your brain receptors. This is an opioid receptor in your brain. Opioids are a heavy chemical. Narcan is a heavier chemical, and it actually blocks it for a short period of time. Kind of peeking to see how much more, because you have the full presentation at the security center. Narcan can take 30 seconds to take effect, and it could last for 30 minutes. Once it wears off, somebody overdoses, the Narcan works, they jump back up, they're back to normal. Once it wears off, they go back into overdose because the opioids are still in their system. So what happens a lot of the time is people are calling 911, they give somebody Narcan, and then they jump back up and they cancel the 911 call, and then they go back out. So ultimately, I've had a few people say, oh, it's not on the island yet, like it's not that big of a thing. Yeah, it's probably here. So yeah, yeah. A significant amount of fentanyl or opioids from the hospital has found its way out. Yeah. And what did we say earlier? It'd be a shame if something bad happened, and then people said after the fact. It's coming. It's been in Ontario for years and years. Like I made this presentation on naloxone specifically 6 years ago because I was in the hospitals. I'm like, wow, a lot of people are dying. So the Narcan works. You cannot administer too much of it that it will kill you. We looked at the numbers today based off of my body mass, 1,100 doses it would take to kill me. It's the same as an EpiPen. It's less effective than an EpiPen in terms of like risk to, I don't know if your security guards use EpiPens, but if you're somewhere with an EpiPen and somebody's having anaphylactic reaction, you're going to use the EpiPen, same as an naloxone. The reason it doesn't get utilized as much and not as many people know about it is because of the stigma surrounding it. And people just don't think it's here, and it is here, right? So, I was just saying to somebody, I might fly home tomorrow. You might not hear about a death for 6 months. You might not hear about a death for 2 years, or it might be tomorrow, right? So we worked with our security vendor at our institution to get it onboarded. It's a 1-hour add-on training to our first aid course that we do. We worked with our public health unit. I think we got some health folks in the room. So we worked with our public health unit in town for them to provide us with the drug with one stipulation. If it gets used, they want to kind of know the scenario. Now, we're not going to share that it was this person and this is their name and this is how you contact them. But they said, we want you to have the naloxone. And then when it expires every 2 years, we'll exchange it. And if you use it, let us know. And so we got it 5 years ago at the college. I presented a larger presentation, about an hour presentation, to all the colleges and universities in Ontario. A lot of them adopted it, said, yeah, we're on board, let's do this. And in 5 years of having naloxone, we haven't used it yet. We haven't had the need to use it yet. But you go 30 minutes down the road to, you said you were at Ryerson University, and this is actually the university that I was explaining earlier today, because I didn't say Ryerson, because like nobody knows. But I said, yeah, Ryerson University, they use it every week. They use it every week. They have the homeless people on the front steps of the facility. They're passed out. They give them a shot. They call EMS. They might give them another shot. We also have this thing in Canada called the Good Samaritan Act. And so basically, if you do something in good faith, you're not going to get penalized for administering a drug. And that includes like your EpiPens, which people are a lot more familiar with because there's just so much more knowledge around it. Exactly, first aid. Oh, I hurt you because I gave you first aid. Well, what was I trying to do? I was trying to help you. I'll even go one more step. And I see you standing up at the back of the room. I'll go one more step. Canada created a Good Samaritan. Oh, what was the name of it? Good Samaritan Opioid Overdose Act. Basically what was happening is out in British Columbia, so the police were responding to these drug overdoses and they were saying, oh, you have illegal drugs, now we're going to arrest you. So you know what happened? People stopped calling the police for drug overdoses because it was like, well, I'm not going to get arrested. So people were willing to die because they didn't want to get arrested. So Canada modified its Good Samaritan Act and said, listen, if we're coming to help you and you have drugs, we're not going to penalize you. We're going to take it. We're not going to charge you, but stop doing that. So that's how that went. So, oh yeah. Considerations, legal implications. Oh, I have it right behind me, sorry. Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act. The police officers carry it, the security guards carry it, the first aid responders carry it. A lot of the time, because if you're going as a first aid responder, you know what, this is actually really applicable to the guards, the more I think about it. If you're going to an individual who potentially has overdosed and you're providing first aid and you get any of that drug on you, you could be there too. The risks of using it, there's none. It's a nasal spray. If you're not on opioids, it's not going to have any impact on you. And then, doing your train the trainer sessions, knowing the expiries. I gave all of my files this morning to the security center, so I know that they're talking about, see where that goes. So now that we have the back of the room standing up, I think the question at this point is, we've really crammed in about 10 topics, right? And we talk about where we go from here. And so we've brought in somebody from another country who's kind of experienced everything from every level. I've been a guard. I worked in the hospitals. I worked with contract service providers. I've worked in education. I've kind of been all around the table. And so you look at where does that value come from within? And my first slide was a photo of me with all my certifications. And I do want to bounce it back a little bit to the group here, right? And so you look at the team at the security center, and I did a little bit more social media investigations. And so Abe, back when he had a full head of hair, and it was all Maria, I think this might have been at a concert you were at one time, or one of the, yeah. Natasha, a photo from 10 years ago when you donated your hair to charity. Leon, when, and we're talking, sorry, Natasha. I was talking to Leon. I said, I thought I found your profile and I wasn't sure it was you. But then, I saw your tattoo on your professional page. I saw your tattoo on your professional page, and I saw the tattoo on your Facebook page, and then I knew it was you. Cookie crumbs, right? You're building a whole story. And Brad, the finance guy, and I was like, I saw Brad in the office. I said, Brad, I found your information through your mom's Facebook. He says, I know she has everything. Sorry, I had to sneak something in there. But basically, where do we go from here? And you look at a team that has had all these global experiences, can bring in all that knowledge, and it can connect you with all of the partners in the industry. Who can talk a little bit more about this. And so Abe says, what I really want is, we're planting a seed. There's some notes that I've seen that have been taken. Ask the question after the fact. Where do we go? What do we do with this? Bring that Canadian guy back, right? Like, sure, I'm on board. But and if that means we hop online on a virtual session, let's do that. So we'll talk more about it. And what really stands out, I have to do my own due diligence, right? Like, I'm talking to companies. Abe's been trying to get me here for years. I'm like, okay, let me figure out a little bit more about the security center. And when you actually see these companies going out in the community and getting involved with the community, they're not selling a service. They're getting engaged. They're building that CEPTED principle of community engagement, knowledge, information sharing, bonding, safety. So I'm like, okay, well, how much do they actually do, right? And so you go through all of the social media investigations, the LinkedIns, the Facebooks, and none of these events that you guys were involved with, the primary function was not offering security services, right? It was like supporting youth and charitable causes and cleanup and all sorts of things. So when you see groups, whether it's within the security industry or anywhere else and partners that you're working with, when their priority is the people, that's what really stands out for me. Now, if we come back, hopefully we do at another time, there's so many more topics, right? So what do we do in the next COVID? We kind of talked about that. Security RFPs, emergency preparedness, managing contract services, employee wellness, violence, mental illness, or ultimately, what do you want to talk about, right? So if we get a chance, if it's more than 2 hours, if it's online, if it's something very specific to your organization, I think that's what we're ultimately here for. So with that, I will reopen it for questions.
We've both been on both sides of being service providers and being security directors for institutions that we work for. What I've noticed, sadly, when I see the procurement culture, especially from government institutions that are deemed extremely sensitive, because we're talking education and healthcare specifically. The emphasis of procurement, the scoring criteria when you're asking for a proposal from the various approved vendors. There's no such thing as approved vendors to start with. So you're not basically comparing apples to apples, because you're asking for proposals from anybody. It could be a Mickey Mouse company that just was born yesterday, one-man show. And unfortunately, the scoring criteria of who gets the tender and who doesn't, it could be Georgetown Hospital, for example, could be all the public schools, is 80% weight on price, 20% on technical expertise. So they don't really, and I asked at one point, in one of the specific tenders, I asked, could we at least get a chance to make a presentation of our security concept that we are trying to sell you? Because all you're going to do is load a bunch of numbers on Bonfire. There's no spirit to that proposal. I can't express what we had planned, how we wanted to integrate and create Caymanian positions for leadership roles at cost in this case. We didn't want to make any margin on it because we wanted to contribute that way by creating some positions that could actually deal with de-escalating situations much better than some expatriate guard could deal with de-escalating situation in a emergency ward or some sort of an ER situation. So unfortunately, and this is where the education is necessary. This is why we, as a thought leader in the country, will continue bringing subject matter experts and hopefully have attendees like you making the time, which we appreciate. And hopefully you take away some of this and then you apply it when it comes time to either advising your colleagues or yourselves when how do you get value from your security program? We talked about SEPTED. Simple thing. Ryerson was also one of my accounts, so was his college in Canada. And surrounding Ryerson is the pit of crime and incidents in Toronto, unfortunately. It's become so bad. Government created these things called safe injection sites to allow addicts to go in and basically be administered by a nurse paid by government. Unfortunately, all these safe injection sites were next to public libraries.
Yeah.
Across from it, there is Beacon Center, which suddenly shoplifting cases go up. Got all these homeless, they go in, shoplift, they go to Chinatown, sell whatever they stole, make enough cash, walk back. A bunch of dealers are all situated conveniently next to safe injection sites. They then use the money. Well, their colleagues who haven't done the shoplifting yet are watching them approach the dealer. There's a fight, stabbings, and all this where there's been Ryerson University that's overcrowded with students.
Yeah.
And then you have something called Yonge and Dundas Square, which is like the New York Square. We had an issue there with public bathrooms being used for injection. So again, applying SEPTED principle, we go in, review what can be done here that is not too kind of offensive. So we looked at the lights, and we changed the type of light that was being used there. And now anyone trying to inject, they can't find their vein because the type of light we use. Yeah. So they decided to move them. They're no longer making these facilities. Low cost. When you see a lot of those benches and you see they're not flat benches, it's kind of annoying. You can't really lie down. That's the purpose, because you don't want anyone to lie down for an extended period of time. So, and you also don't want skateboarders to come in and there's a lot of that situation.
Yeah.
Which brings graffiti, which then the music, classical music, drives certain people out. So we have utilization of SEPTED. A lot of our team has been encouraged to certify themselves in SEPTED 1 through 3, level 1 through 3, and all the other professional certifications. So we want to bring and put all of that knowledge at your service to kind of make your environment to help you, because you may not have a security department that has experts in it. And we're bringing all this kind of experience to potentially make an impact as the thought leader. But, so this is really why we're doing it. We talked about the app. We have an app ready now for deployment. And when you receive you're all going to receive an email in about a week's time containing the subject that we discussed and everything else. Along with it, you're going to receive a link to our app, which you can download and start using for personal safety app. There is something called duty of care. So a lot of organizations, especially the HR, they have the duty of care, whether they have traveling individuals that are being sent for, social purposes, like to go in, what do you call it, a welfare case where they may be attacked because they go. Even those that do Meals on Wheels. I did a Meals on Wheels trip in West Bay. I didn't recognize where we were actually. it did not feel like we were in Cayman Islands. So it is important for us to take care of the people that are actually putting themselves in those situations, even those that leave their work late at night. And some of the locations that have our guards, we escort them to their vehicles, but some people may be leaving. Could be a judge, could be court workers, and they could be dealing with a sensitive case. Their risk profile changes immediately. So proactive approach is important. SEPTED helps. It's a team effort. So if you have any more questions, please, he's still here, and we have some beverages in the back. Please enjoy. And thanks for coming.
I just realized while you were playing classical music when you picked me up because you wanted me out of your car. Yeah. To give a little bit more context to the comment about the RFP, I find this fascinating because we talked about it earlier in the week. We have procurement and spending rules in Ontario, unless you're the government. But if you are doing something that's over $10,000, you have to get 3 quotes. If you're doing something over $100,000, you have to go to tender, RFP. Our RFPs, the financial component of the total proposal is somewhere between 25 to 30% total. So that means it's 75 to 70% package. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do? I kind of disclosed earlier our contract is a $3 million contract. I had somebody come in at 2.4. Would I have loved to save 600 grand? Sure. Did I know who the company is? Never heard of them. And when that company fails, where are they going to be? Shut the door, bankrupt. Thanks for the whatever we gave them, and gone. So, yeah, some considerations could go on about RFPs. Anything else that we kind of talked about? Do we want to look more at Maria's social media? No. Anybody else?
When he was talking about the naloxone, and he said if you touch the person or if the drug touches you, that you then become overdosed. It's not the naloxone that touches you, it's the drug that the person is on. So if it's on their clothes, etc., then that person also it's like a contact drug, then they become.
Yeah, a lot of this is surrounding the clarification of what's what, right? It's a lot of new terminology. Narcan, naloxone, fentanyl, the presentation I gave you, oxycodone, benzos, the list goes on and on. That's a lot of terminology for somebody that's not in healthcare and doesn't completely understand the concept. You could take a shot of naloxone that's not going to do anything to you. It won't do anything to me standing right here unless I take 1,150, whatever we calculated it was. So it's not it's like an EpiPen. The EpiPen's not going to put you into anaphylactic shock. It's, the bee sting or the food you're allergic to. So that's kind of the correlation there. It's education needs to happen. Yeah, for sure. We'll chat for a bit. I'm sure there'll be some Q&A. Thanks. And then if you have additional questions, send them this way. And then we'll connect and see how we can answer that. So thanks very much. Appreciate that.